Question 44. Jim makes a statement, if you have visited the White House, then you have been to Washington, D.C. Which of the following statements is logically equivalent to Jim's statement? So let's draw a little graphic so we have an easier way of visualizing this. So if we have this big circle that represents D.C., then inside it somewhere we have a smaller circle that represents the White House, right? The White House is within D.C. So if you have visited the White House, then you have been to Washington, D.C. So the White House has to be completely within D.C. so that if you have been, right, there's no way to get to the White House here without also being in this larger circle here. So, and that makes sense, right? What we know about the White House in Washington, D.C., that's the way that it's represented. So if we look through our statements here, we see that the first two aren't even conditional statements. They don't have the if-then format. They have you have visited the White House or you have been to Washington, D.C. These will never be the right answers because they don't even follow the same pattern, so it can't be logically equivalent. We're not saying you have done this or you have done this. Simply, this is the relationship. So if you've done this, then you have to have also done this. In any case, F and G, these statements that aren't even that if-then pattern don't even qualify themselves to be right answers, so we don't even have to keep reading them. H says, if you have been to Washington, D.C., then you have visited the White House. So if we look at our graphic, if you have been to Washington, D.C., then you have visited the White House. Well, is it possible to be in this D.C. circle but not in the White House circle? And yeah, right, there's plenty of space. Actually, I'll get rid of this first. So all of this, right, you could be anywhere in here and you'll be in D.C. but not in the White House. So that's not true, right? You can be, let's say you're here, right? You can be in D.C. but not have been in the White House. So H won't work. If you have not visited the White House, then you have not been to Washington, D.C. Well, is it possible to have been to D.C. but not the White House? Sure, right? And that's exactly the case that we had before with H. So it won't be that, right? It's possible to have not visited the White House, but also to have been to D.C. Then K, if you have not been to Washington, D.C., so we've never been anywhere in this circle, then you have not visited the White House. And that's true, right? If you've never been anywhere in D.C., then it's not possible for you to have visited the White House, which is in D.C. So the right answer here will be K. If you have not been to Washington, D.C., then you have not visited the White House.